Okay, so in the last video, I gave you my first impressions of this Tonemaster Super Reverb. On the whole, it was pretty favourable. I had a few issues that I'm going to get into over the coming videos, but in this first sort of part of the series after that first impressions, I really want to delve into pedals. A lot of us obviously looking for an amp that has great personality on its own, which I think we can say a Super Reverb in general obviously has a fantastic character to it, beautiful tone if you enjoy it, and this Tonemaster mimics it really well. Obviously there are details we'll talk about in the main review, but we also want to be able to use our amps as pedal platforms when needed, and that's what I'll talk about in this video. There are other times when you want to use your amp not as a pedal platform, but you want to use pedals to enhance the character of the amp when it's already driving. We're gonna do that in the review, but I know a lot of you like to see an amp used very clean with pedals, so that's what we're doing. And in that first short clip, that was the Shanks ODS-1, one of my favorite overdrive pedals used with a very clean amplifier setting. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to show you some more of the pedal on. Before that, you'll just hear a few seconds of the amp as it was. It's set really low, number 4. Now, I've heard a lot of times that Super Reverbs are really, really loud. Well, at number 4, this amp is not loud. I really honestly checked 5 times as to whether the attenuator was doing something, so it just wasn't loud enough personally for me, and I had to keep turning up my mic preamps, and I've used the pedal on a high volume compared to what I would do on a tube amp set really low, like on number 1 or 2. So that actually could be a real benefit for some people. And I said in the last video that suddenly at about 5.5 or 6, the amp just jumps up quite a lot in volume. That's clearly an element of the programming. But anyway, let's get into some more sounds. I'll come back and talk about how the Shanks worked with it in a second. Okay, so I think you probably heard there, the amp it's fine, it's not massively interesting, it's quite neutral, and that's probably what you want. As I said, it's not really very loud, which really surprised me, so I had to turn up the Shanks quite a lot, which I don't normally get to do. Luckily, it's a really high headroom pedal, and it works, you know, just flawlessly. My experience with that was that it was great to play. The Shanks sounded fantastic, it broke up at the right moments, but there was something a little bit less dynamic about it. It's not that you can't play with your fingers and get really quiet and then sort of break it up. There was just something a bit more predictable about the way it worked. which is sort of what I might have expected, but altogether, that Super Reverb and that Shanks it did sound incredible, and I really, really enjoyed it. As to whether I would get bored of that quite reasonably quickly, just because it just sort of sounds a little bit flatter, a little bit, honestly, you know, predictable is the word I could use. You know, with a tube amp, you feel like things are a bit more spontaneous, although you can be dynamic and control what you're doing. You know, the valve amp throws out these beautiful little nuggets of sound here and there. This doesn't do that, right? It just does pretty much the same thing every time well, maybe not every time, you know, it's very clever programming, and they've done a very good job. I am impressed. I'm going to withhold more judgment after I've done, or, you know, until I've done some more pedals. So now we're going to get on a Klone. So I think today we'll use the Ryra pedal, and yeah, let's see what that sounds like. So I don't use clones that much for my own playing, but I really enjoyed doing that. I tried it out with a few different guitars and settled on the Les Paul to show off the amp and the pedal together really well. And I thought the amp held together really well, but that's almost, it could be a positive or a negative. It's quite hi-fi. Now it's great that you're getting a proper amp cabinet with proper guitar amp speakers in here. So you do get the feel of a proper amp. It is a real amp. What you don't get, it's a bit too hi-fi in some respects. It doesn't sag and mush the same way that a valve amp tends to do. And you could see that as a positive or a negative. For your audience, it may well be fantastic. They're going to have no clue. And so it just sounds like this really high quality sound. As far as you're playing, there's a little bit less fewer options when it comes to sort of digging in. It all sounds quite similar, but what's fantastic is it's not just an anonymous sound. This sounds like a super reverb. It sounds like a super reverb with pedals, but maybe just missing some of the edge that a vintage, or you know, not just a vintage, but a valve super reverb would have. It doesn't snarl, doesn't bite as much perhaps, but then we've got the amp set pretty low. So I'm still exploring here, and I'm starting to understand some of the positives and negatives. So far with overdrive pedals, the amp holds up really well. So we're going to try a couple more briefly, and then we'll try a fuzz pedal and we'll try a reverb pedal to sort of see if we can improve the reverb of the amp. So let's get on with the next overdrive. Okay, so the blue side of the Protein has always been one of my favorite pedals. It has the sweetest sound, some of the best dynamics I've ever played, and it just always sounds great no matter what you try. So I was really excited to plug this in, and what's more interesting to me is that I don't normally like the green side, even in conjunction with the blue side, but halfway through the coming clip, I'm going to kick in the green. And I don't know if it's the way I dialed it in today, or that plus the fact of this amp and the guitar together, but there was something so chewy, big, dynamic and fun to play about having both sides on at the same time. It sort of converted me and made me more interested in it. So let's hear it, and then we'll chat about it more in a second. You know, sometimes with a valve amp, you're sort of fighting between maybe the preamp of the amp and the pedal, or you're fighting between the fact that it gets so loud, or that pedals act slightly differently with each amp, so it's difficult and unusual. You know, situations can arise. There can be lots of noise. It can be difficult to tame that, right? So far with the Super Reverb, one of the biggest positives of it, it doesn't feel like that at all. Set it at this particular sort of level, so not too loud, not overdriving the amp, and the pedals play nice. They play really, really nicely, and it sort of makes up for the slight lack of, or the slight reduction in dynamics and feel and spontaneity that you get. And I'm not talking a huge drop down, but there is a drop down in all those things. But the fact that it seems easy to dial in an overdrive pedal is really fantastic. You do have to turn it up quite a lot more than I've ever had to do with any valve amp to get a similar sort of volume. But with a good pedal that has high headroom, you're not losing a lot of anything really, or you're not losing anything at all. So I've really enjoyed this, and I know this pedal, the left-hand side at least, inside out, and it sounded and played beautifully. So this one I'm really impressed with. Okay, so we're going to finish here with a set of 3 different pedals. We've got the Duellist by Tone. I'm going to use the String Singer. It's like a tube screamer. Now, historically, I don't like the String Singer side of this pedal. It's always sounded quite processed, very mid-heavy, obviously, being a tube screamer type, and just hasn't suited me. Funnily enough, this is the first time I've ever enjoyed using it. In the context of using a Strat, a Super Reverb, and a tube screamer type pedal, this plays and sounds fantastically, exactly like I always imagined a tube screamer would, and it really, really can give you SRV vibes if that's what you want. So cue some rather poor impressions of my SRV playing, which I'm just starting to learn, so please forgive me for only being able to sort of do poor mimicry, but it's sort of apt for this particular rig. Really enjoyed that actually. As I said, it's the first time I'm really enjoying a tube screamer. It sounded exactly to me the way I would want to sound if I was trying to get that tone, that famous, you know, Texas tone. And yeah, I'm delighted actually that I can finally have an amp and pedal setup that gives me that for when I need it. And then I really enjoyed it with the P90s, you know, quite similar to the Strat in a way, but it's got its completely own thing as well with a much bigger bite. Yeah, really enjoyed that. Okay, so now I want to take turn off the reverb of the amp and try using a reverb pedal. So I've got the Topanga Catalin Bred Topanga, which is one of my favorite reverb pedals for that sort of vintage spring, amp spring reverb. And I wanted to shorten the sort of dwell quite a lot because the amp has a very long tail and you can't change that, and it doesn't feel realistic in any way as far as I'm concerned. And I've heard other people say that too. So I've tried it with this. Maybe I didn't dial it in enough because I'm not getting enough spring back. But the other thing about the Topanga is it has a great clean boost to it, in the sense it's got a volume knob that doesn't colour the tone, but it really brings things up. So you could use that as well as a boost. So let's hear what that sounds like. So yeah, I mean, I would probably use that instead of the amp's reverb, certainly when I wanted a boost as well. And then you could use the amp's reverb for that long tail if you needed something like that. It could actually be quite ambient. And I find when I've kicked in the tremolo at any point, the reverb actually works really well with that. So maybe that's what they had in mind as well, to give a sort of bigger swelling thing rather than like the short attack of a spring reverb. But now we want to hear the fuzz. So we've got all three pedals, the Topanga and the string singer, and now in front of that we've got the SM fuzz, which is a germanium fuzz, and it's really going to push everything over the edge. I'm yet to have really great success with this amp and fuzzes. I think that was okay, sort of a bit too fuzzy for me, a bit too overdriven, and it sort of really rolls off the top end, and it hasn't got a lot of character, and I can't quite get it to do the rolled back glassy thing that a lot of people love. So fuzzes and me and this amp not doing too well so far, and in fact I just want you to hear very quickly, if you use the fuzz by itself, yeah, it doesn't really work very well. So that's one big sticking point I've had so far with the amp, is just fuzz by itself, which is a thing I love to do when I play personally, and I know a lot of people do as well. In fact, you know, an always-on fuzz tone that's sort of rolled back and just giving a little bit of a zip and a bite and a glassiness is really, really great, and I can't get this amp to do it, especially at low volumes. So we're going to work on that in another video, where we probably will attempt to turn the amp up a lot more to help the fuzz, and then use the attenuator to bring the volume down, and so that's where we can test the attenuator. But for overdrive pedals, this amp is brilliant. I've got to be honest there. Now, I've mentioned a few times it's not quite as dynamic and sensitive and all those things, and it isn't, but it's very close. It's close enough. The one thing that I think people will love about it is that it really lets the pedal do the talking. So with a lot of amps I use, the amp has such a distinct character that you're adding the pedal and you're mixing the two. But with this, it sounds like what I imagine the pedal's going to sound like. And so if you're really into pedals and you just want a clean platform that's convenient, it's not incredibly expensive, you know, a lot cheaper than the valve version, easier to carry around, all those things, then this amp for overdrive pedals is really, really impressive. You know, so far it's its strongest suit for me. So I really enjoyed that, and I hope you did too. As I said, there's going to be other videos about this now over the next month or two as I get more used to the amp. I'm sure you will want to see how the attenuator works and whether we can play at bedroom volume or a sort of small gig volume with good tone. And we're going to do a full review, so that if you want to just see a bit of everything about this amp and how it works, I'll get that out there as well soon enough. We'll also do one with some big reverb pedals and things like that, see if we can use it for ambient playing rather than the typical traditional super reverby sound of, you know, SRV and all of those sorts of players. So if you want to see that, please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and if you've enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. I'll see you next time.